All right. Hello, everyone. We are sadly at the end of our seasons of the podcast Philosophy Gets Personal. But today I have a wonderful guest with me, is Zsuzsanna Chappell. She is a social philosopher based in London. She is currently an independent scholar affiliated both with the London School of Economics and King's College London. Her past work was in the area of political theory. She left academia just over 10 years ago, thinking she wouldn't return, but she started writing philosophy again after becoming aware of problems of injustice in medicine and realizing that applied philosophy could do something good here. She currently works on issues related to moral and social philosophy of mental illness. She identifies as a madwoman philosopher. Her current main projects are a book on the philosophy of self-harm and parenting to young children. Thank you, Zsuzsanna, for being here. It's a great pleasure for me to
Thank
have
you
you.
for having me.
Look, if you don't mind, I would like to start from this identification you mentioned in your bio. A madwoman philosopher. What does that mean? What does it mean for you?
Well, I think primarily it's a kind of political identification. So madness is a political identification. So I've got experience with serious mental illness for much of my life. And I think for much of my life also that was kind of downplayed both my family and professionals and myself, so then I get depressed, so then I get anxious, but then, I faced up to it that, it is more than that, without going into details, into many details. And so I identify personally as someone who has this experience of serious mental illness that's kind of recurrent over my life. It's kind of a chronic illness disability, I think. But also nowadays there's people with experience of mental illness and who also do activism or advocacy or research. I think med with a capital M, just like kind of the equivalent of queer or crip. Crip is for disabled disabled people. It's more of a political identification that they're, identifying with a liberatory practice of trying to change the world to kind of make it better for people who experience the world differently. And usually what I've come across is the opposite of mad is sane, but we could use non-mad or something like that. So I'm kind of starting to think, is sane, does it sound a bit like deprecatory? Funny enough, because it can sound a bit sane when people who identify as mad use it.
Yeah.
But like my friend and co-author Sophia Yapshon says, this doesn't mean that identifying as mad doesn't mean that we're mentally ill all the time or psychotic all the time or something. It just means that we have this experience and we want to, or at least for me, it means that I also want to turn it into a kind of liberatory practice through my research, because I really don't think I'm cut out for activism. I think, emotionally, I don't think I'm suitable for that. Advocacy, you end up kind of doing because you hear about things and then you try and help people, or you point out, well, maybe we should be doing something differently, which is, I see advocacy. But I also call myself particularly as a madwoman philosopher, because I think gender really plays a difference when it comes to mental illness. And often the way we think about mental illness tends to be kind of stereotypically as women's mental illness. But also I think it's for women because women have to do so much of the emotional labor. In a way, mental illness is more noticeable. So if your emotional life breaks down, then you have to do all this emotional labor. I mean, parenting is one example, but even in the workplace, women are often the ones doing the emotional labor. Then it's just a lot more noticeable. And then philosopher is kind of, more obvious. But I think it's just as I've read an interview with Judith Butler, and she said that for her career doesn't mean so much about who she's sleeping with at the time. It's about it's not like kind of a sexual thing in that sense.
Right.
It's about a liberatory practice towards different types of people.
Mm-hmm. How well, I have so many questions here.
That's
One
good.
about first person experience writing in philosophy, because we were discussing that elsewhere. When we speak about philosophy of psychiatry or philosophy of pathologies and so on, the person with mental illness is always the other. And the writer, he's there with his computer trying to fix it. So I wanted to ask you how it feels to be able to be the one talking for yourself and to be able, if you can, write on first person experience basis. And also the other branch I was curious about is this emotional labor you are talking about that separates men from women. Instinctively, when I think about this distinction, I think of, the evergreen accusation of being hysteric, of being too emotional, being exaggerate with their feelings and emotions. I wonder if that is part of the labor. So I leave you with these two questions.
All right. Actually, I think there's more than 3 questions. So I think in general in philosophy, we talk too little about the personal, or the way we talk about the personal can be odd. Often people in philosophy will, non-med philosophers especially, and neurotypical philosophers, because I'm neurodivergent as well as have personal experience of mental illness, have this they'll say, well, of course, this is how it works, this is how we reason, this is how this is how action works, this is how reason works, this is how emotions work. And there's no of course about it.
No.
Because even I think within people who are neurotypical, or within the kind of broad societal norm, I think there's a lot more mental diversity than we recognize. It's just that we don't even have ways of thinking about it or talking about it. So one good example is the recent discovery that not everyone can see mental images. And people saying after they found out that there is this difference, people are saying, oh, but I always thought that was, just a figure of speech in my mind's eye. Well, people meant that literally. And I find that comes up a lot in philosophy of psychiatry as well. So Richard Gibbs, in his recent book on madness, says that, writes the beginning of a chapter, something like, of course, when people describe experiences like, and then he gives some example of delusions of like the clock tower being upside down or something like that. Of course, we think it's a metaphor. And I thought, well, whenever I read those things, I never thought it was a metaphor, because to me, I've had experiences like that too. So, those kinds of things happen. It happens.
Yeah,
it's not a metaphor. Whereas some things that people described, I kind of thought it was a metaphor. And like some of classical phenomenology for a long time, I thought Husserlian phenomenology. I thought one of the reasons I didn't get into it is because I thought, well, I just don't get this. This is some very complicated metaphor that I am not getting. And, obviously there's something wrong with me because I'm just not getting, what's being referred to here? Like, what is he trying to talk about? And then it turns out that, you know, people often mean these things literally about like time experiences and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, that's different. But until you start reading it, you know, before I started reading phenomenology of psychopathology, you know, I didn't realize that these things happen, or, you know, normal people are different. I think that in a way comes back a little bit to one of the things you've said, which is, you know, what kind of experience do we center? Like, who is the other? And in a way, I just think, you know, where are the books about for neurodivergent parents on how to parent a neurotypical child?
Oh God, yeah.
You know, that would be very useful, actually.
God, that's right.
You know, where is the phenomenology written by mad philosophers, explaining to mad philosophers, but non-mad phenomenology is like, and saying, and kind of centering the different experience and saying, well, you know, actually, all of these things people take for granted need unpacking. So, you know, I think it's a question, you know, what experience do we center? And we always center, you know, the kind of socially normative experience.
But where do you think madness starts? Because, you know, there's Basaglia that says that from closeness, nobody's normal. But that said, if we stand by this, then we risk to downplay serious mental illness. Where do we draw the line?
I think that might actually be personal. I mean, there's always going to be borderline cases. And I think focusing on, oh, you know, how do we draw the boundary at the end of the day might be not horribly useful. And like I said in a paper on mental illness published last year, you know, an experience which may be, you know, just about manageable, okay. Under some circumstances, you add something like, you know, the demands of motherhood, and then suddenly you experience it as an illness. So I think partly it is, I guess, is there a difference between madness and mental illness? I don't know. I guess, you know, can non-mentally ill people be mad? It's an interesting question. I don't know the answer. But again, I think the boundary cases, you know, determining the answer is going to be very individual and personal. So yes, I'm not sure about it.
Yeah, because, you know, I think of those normal philosophers who had, you know, mental problems. Now I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but
yes, I know.
but, you know, there's quite a number of philosophers, of important philosophers we have in our textbook that were writing philosophy from the normal standpoint of view, saying, as we were saying, and they were dictating what is the of course, what is the normal, what is the metaphor, and so on. And their life was completely upside down. I wonder how much is, again, a matter of majority, of normativity, of I don't know, disparities that are dictated from above, and shape the way in which philosophy should be catered. So the academic paper should be written in this fashion, the book in the other, not too much lived experience, and so on and so on.
I think that is possibly changing, just talking to people, in terms of how much they talk about, you know, their lived experience. That seems to be changing in general. I was just having this conversation with some people, even today, and, you know, how much to include about your own thinking, about your own process as well. And I think people are slowly starting to include a bit more. And I think looking at other disciplines like anthropology, where people have looked much more closely at these issues, is also useful. But also personally, I feel that because where I am in my life, in a way, I can afford to take risks. Whereas, people often couldn't afford to take risks. And stigma is a very real thing. So, you encounter all kinds of being told you can't do that. Yeah. And also when it's about lived experience, there's also an expectation that you do then kind of provide all kinds of details. And this is something that hasn't happened to me yet, but this seems to be a question of a matter of time. But I mean, it hasn't happened in peer reviews. It has happened in other contexts. People get peer review responses to submitted articles saying, well, you say you have a lived experience perspective on this. Well, we really want you to describe, details of, what you not just say, not just talk in general and philosophically and say, well, I've got lived experience. No, we want you to describe that lived experience. What was it like? And I mean, this seems quite invasive.
Yes.
And often, it's unnecessary to that specific paper, which is why the person's excluded it. Yeah. And obviously, this is not just related to philosophy of psychiatry or mental illness. It's, you find it whenever people talk about anything related to their identity. So, it could be race, queerness, in all of these fields, people have, faced these demands, which are quite invasive. But I think especially it gets difficult when it comes to mental illness, because we are quite vulnerable. So talking about a lot of these topics, it's not easy. And it's not just that it's not easy or it's emotionally burdensome, but it could actually literally just send us over the edge. If there are some things I can't write about because I don't want to become ill doing this stuff. That's not the point. But even people who, work in this field, who have written a lot about mental illness, sometimes just don't realize quite how vulnerable some of us are. And I think, trying to set boundaries can be very difficult. And that's also why I'm also writing about the role of lived experience or subject relevant lived experience, then what I call minoritized scholars in kind of human sciences, which includes, anything from philosophy to medicine, even climate change science, the people who are personally impacted by those issues. What do we actually want from them? Because there's a lot about epistemic oppression and epistemic exploitation and those kinds of things, but not so much about what do we do. So that's also something I'm trying to write about, how to have some kind of principles of not unwittingly kind of using people, because people's intentions are often good, but it's just kind of taken for granted that we will share.
How do you think the worst way to use people expresses? I mean, I think I agree with you. It's beautiful to give them voice. But yeah, we don't want to exploit this voice. Can you give us, maybe you already gave us an example of how to exploit this voice when someone becomes too nosy and wants to know details that do not, are not relevant for their paper. And yeah, this is really part of how crazy is the world of reviewers. I mean, it's yeah. Sometimes I got rejected. One paper of mine got rejected because this person said, "Ah, she looks depressed."
Yeah, I mean, that's just
Yeah, it's completely beyond the scope of a review. A comment like this.
and also it's stigmatizing, right?
Oh God, yeah. And it was, a paper on pregnancy, postpartum, and so on. So clearly, the easiest thing to say is, yeah, clearly she's in postpartum depression. Okay, that's completely over the top. But anyway, I don't know. Do you think that this could be part of the medical injustice that we experience in daily life? I mean, I think of how often common people don't have a voice because there are policies and ways to do things that are imposed from above. And theoretically, academia should be the place where ideas are brought to life for lawmakers to see them and change things. But then in academia as well, people who actually experience medical injustice cannot speak. So how do we do? Do you think this problem reverberates in medical injustice? I know that you're writing about that as well.
I think is that so is your question more broadly about medicine or more narrowly about
Broad. I like broad.
All right. Well,
Or wherever you want to go.
I think there's I think in general there's a lot of discrimination in medicine against people, like the what we do have clear numbers on is, for people of color, there's a lot of discrimination. But you see the same thing for disabled people as well, and I think for mental illness as well. There's a lot of discrimination. I mean, from my personal experience, I've never had bad experiences with psychiatry, but where I have had bad experiences because of my mental illness is that people look at your medical record, they see, the mental illness, and, it could be anything, and it's dismissed. Physical symptoms are dismissed, and
That's a good point. Yeah.
that's something that's happened to me so many times. And this is something I think the Royal College of Psychiatrists every couple of years then says something about how this is really horrible and we need to do something. But the Royal College of Psychiatrists cannot really do anything because all of my experiences were with other specialties. So, good luck with that. So, psychiatrists have always taken my physical illness seriously. It's just the rest of medicine doesn't always cooperate.
Yeah.
So I think, you get a lot of discrimination, and I think a lot of this really is rooted in societal discrimination still, and not just discrimination but societal attitudes about mental illness and madness, whether that's actually just milder forms of depression, from milder forms of depression to like really serious mental illness. I think society still, well, we talk about it now in theory, but the basic kind of underlying ways of looking at it haven't really changed. So that's something I want to write about more. Why actually these social attitudes we have are very problematic. And then I think what you see in academia and in medicine are just versions of that wider social attitude towards
Yeah.
mental illness. And then one thing I've blogged about is I'm really interested in discourse and language use. I've been very interested in that since my PhD, which I've written about deliberative democracy. So there's a lot of language use there. So I've really been interested in discourse theory since then, and just the kind of discourse we use around mental illness and the way we use mental illness discourse. Mental illness slurs are very much acceptable when other slurs wouldn't be, and that's something I've blogged about, even though I'm not planning to write on. But what I do hope to write on more is the way we use the kinds of metaphors we tend to turn to when we talk about mental illness, and especially when it comes to psychosis. It's a lot of them are kind of sleep metaphors, like that person.
What do you mean?
Now, often, psychosis is often compared to dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of kind of sleep metaphors in general. People are not quite awake when they are mentally ill, and there's something. Obviously, when someone's asleep or unconscious, then that compromises their agency completely. So to put you on the kind of asleep spectrum, it means that you stop being a sleep person. And that's the thing. And this comes back to your example. Sorry, I'm coming around in a really long way. Postpartum / depressed. We can't really take this person seriously in what they're saying because they're not quite there. But there are other metaphors we could be using, especially for psychosis. So having small children, I just think it really reminds me of play as well. The toys can fly, all kinds of things are possible. The bed is a spaceship. So in a way, actually, that is just as, that could be just as good as metaphor, but there you have some kind of agency and a person inside rather than, someone is
unconscious.
Yeah, exactly. Or partially conscious or whatever, and I think that's something that I want to write about. And I think that comes up in your example as well. Like, let's not publish this paper because it doesn't sound like this person is fully there. And I think
that diagnoses me. They
exactly.
Say,
Sorry?
They even diagnose me and they say, okay, she's depressed. All right.
Exactly. But if this person is not quite there,
she's not there.
Let's not listen. Which is a form of epistemic injustice, obviously. But then, was I going to say? Oh no, sorry. When you lose your trust.
I know. Sorry, did you find it?
No, go ahead.
One of the things I wanted to ask you is what philosophy helped you to channel your ideas, your fights, your passion. And now you mentioned discourse theory, which our audience might not be familiar with. Okay. So if you can say a few words would be great. If there are others, I would be very curious to hear.
I guess I'm just interested in general about the way we use discourse and the way it shapes the way we perceive the world. There's different ways and approaches to discourse theory. So, whether you're into Habermasian communicative ethics or whether you're more concerned with the way that language shapes thought. Maybe I don't know if you normally include links. I mean, actually, and the other thing I really should mention with my, and this is really my neurodivergence as well. Embarrassingly for a philosopher, I'm incredibly bad at names. So half the time I want to say, oh, that book, but and it's in that blue book right there. And that's why usually I have my phone out, also in conferences and so on, because I'm always making notes and trying to like put things down and relate things to each other. But yes, I'm incredibly bad.
We can include links. I
Yes.
completely relate. Absolutely. Yeah.
But mainly for myself, my concern with this course is the way we use language and the way it shapes our perception of the world. And there's multiple ways that can be you can relate to that, but a lot of it is there's kinds of basically it's you can take like a linguistic approach to it, or a philosophical approach. There's various ways of thinking about it, or even thinking about soul and and how to do things with words, that kind of that's just so speech act theory, all of that. I think for me broadly feeds into all of this, and it's come back to me what I want. And again, it kind of relates to my neurodivergence. Is that I think what makes it really difficult for philosophy is to identify as someone who loses their mind sometimes, is that your mind is your research tool. So you can't go and do some lab work or something and then draw on your results. No, it's all happening in your mind. So I think it's a lot trickier to define as such, because it's like your research instrument is broken, or that's how it can fit. That's how it can sometimes across. Yeah,
that's so on point. Yeah. It's as if there's more to explore, because well, it's also walking more on the line, because there are so many doors that can be open, because you accept that these doors are there because they are real, as we were saying about conscious, unconscious, playing and so on. But it's also more triggering, because every time you write on a topic, especially if you use that tool that is in the topic as well, you are, your intimate life is upside down, because you are exploring that room, and you are looking under the carpet and moving that couch, and everything is upside down. I remember when I wrote about love, sex, and intimacy. Of course, I divorced. And my life was completely upside down. And I was writing about that topic, and I was feeling an idiot. Because who gives me the authority about writing something like that while my life is going through such a mess, such a disorder? But I don't know. At the same time, there was so much to look at, so much to explore. Here, I come back to something we said via email in these days. I don't know, that writing about happiness, right, or good vibes, topics, it can be really nice. It can be, uplifting and so on. But it's not what we write about. It's when we, it's. I don't know if it has a bias, but it's something that it's part of our lived experience, something we can be critical about. Love, it could be a wonderful topic. But as you wrote somewhere at some point, love too can hurt badly. So I don't know, being a philosopher is really tricky. Because you have to pretend to be impartial, to be, you know, a researcher, to be above the parts, and so on. But the tools you are using come from your mind, that come
Well,
from your
I
experience.
think even love. For me,
Uh-huh.
philosophy is kind of like a love affair.
Uh-huh. For
No,
me.
it's I love philosophy, and I love um, all of. I love writing. I love reading. I just love doing it. But I mean, as you know, nowadays, all those books about work doesn't love you back. I think, and reviewer two definitely doesn't love you back. So,
I know the feeling. Yeah.
but philosophy itself, it's the love of
Mhm.
wisdom, right? And for me, it's genuinely love. And um, I listen, I like listening to kind of sad love songs, thinking about research, which is actually, I'd like to say, do not say this in a grant writing workshop, because people will look at you like
You did.
like, you genuinely are. This is a madwoman philosopher who listens to sad love songs, thinking about her research. But actually, there is a lot
Yeah.
of unrequited love. Because
Yeah.
I love philosophy, and philosophy is of a nature, it cannot love me back. It's just
In a fair.
it's
Yeah.
just like if you love a tree, it's not going to love you back.
Uh-huh.
It's
Yeah.
just
That's a
and
beautiful.
I'm sure that phenomenologists will start thinking about, I don't know, Buber or something, and think about the Ida relationship or whatever. But for me, it's just like this. And also I experience emotions very intensely, which I've discovered. I mean, again, this is something I've kind of discovered much more reading phenomenology of psychopathology. Because the weird thing is, you start reading this stuff and you realize your emotions are pathological, the way you experience your body is pathological, the way you experience time is pathological. I mean, you're just like, no, actually, let's just. At first, that was really hurtful, but now I'm just thinking, no. Let's just think about, we need to think different ways. So I'm thinking of it as as different. And I think you mentioned towards the beginning that, how do we think about the normal and the kind of experiences people had? I think for me, mental illness falls under the kind of category of mental difference.
Mm-hmm.
So even within relatively normal, just like with being able to see images on your mind eye or not, there's a range of experiences. But anyway, so I experience emotions very intensely, so that really then helps me to kind of to work on these topics, because it's something I feel intensely about, both philosophy, which I love, and then the topics which a lot of social injustice can make me very angry. So more than one therapist has said over the decades, without any prompting, that I seem to have some kind of real like justice, hang up on social justice, which I don't think is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Which they didn't say it like it was a bad thing either, but this is just something, I get very, very angry, very frustrated and angry. And just reading the news, there's always something to get very angry about. And then, if I read, I don't know, ableist theories or whatever, I get very angry about. And in a way, research is somewhere I can take these emotions. So, if I throw a book across the room, really angry, no one's going to call me,
Of course.
fine, I'm hysterical or whatever. But you can call me hysterical if you want. But, it's somewhere I can take those strong emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about it being emotionally exhausting. It's also a way of channeling emotions, because all of that upset would still be there, but at least this way it's channeled. And the reason I'm writing about mental illness is because I've had these things since I was about 8. I'm in my 40s, I'm kind of used to it. So it's not so difficult. Really what got me into research and writing were personal experiences of really bad pregnancy and birth trauma. With my second child also, I had pregnancy trauma. So, these experiences of really bad pregnancy trauma, and just seeing, the kind of, even when people want to help you, that the knowledge isn't there on how to help women who are seriously ill during pregnancy. And I think there's a lot of that I've seen in psychiatry as well. People want to help you, but then, we need more stuff to help people. And I can't, basically the pregnancy stuff, I tried, I can't even go to a talk or a conference or anything. I can't read about it. I definitely can't write about it. It's just, it's too difficult. Whereas the kinds of things I do write about are things that I think are important, but I feel I can manage. So I'm writing about self-harm, which...
Yeah. Oh, no, I lost you.
My kind of running joke is that, all the creative writing... Oh, sorry. My running joke is that all the creative writing books say, "Oh, write what you know." So, I'm writing about self-harm because I used to in the past self-harm, but it's it's something that I feel comfortable writing about. But again, also the way I try and balance it is by, firstly, there's a lot in philosophy about, problems with self-knowledge. So even though I've got lived experience with mental illness or self-harm, I don't base my work entirely on my own experience. So I use that as a kind of starting point and a way to think about, start thinking about things. But then I read a lot, both qualitative research, interviews, and so on. I read philosophy, I read anthropology, sociology, I read a lot of social sciences on these issues. So then I burden that out, and that can then lead to the problem that what I think about self-harm kind of personally might end up contradicting what I think about self-harm professionally.
Yeah, that's the beauty of discoveries, right?
And there is definitely cognitive dissonance going on, but it's I need to burden it out beyond my own experience, because my own experience can be taken to be universal. And also, my experience is not, luckily, I'd say, is not, that exciting or special in that, within the normal range for the issues I've experienced, which is a good thing. Like, you don't want to be the one in a million person. And I think it's a really good thing that there's a lot more testimony now about first personal work, both in research but also the biographical writing. So, like Alan Sachs's book about her schizophrenia, I think it's really good to have more of that stuff. But I wish there was more of, more writing that also captured the ordinary experience, which is not that of highly educated, affluent white women. So there is, I think there is, as with everything, the danger of elite capture of issues being, and what's important, can be guided by elites. And I think that's why I also, when it comes to the social aspects, I think mental illness is linked to poverty, low educational achievement, lack of permanent social relationships, all these kinds of problems, which I'm not experiencing at all. So I think, for me, those are the issues that I want to also always bring in.
Mhm.
I think, people needing help.
Thank you for doing this. I appreciate your work. We certainly need it. How did you encounter philosophy the first time? I was curious.
Well, I studied politics and social policy at the London School of Economics and government. It's
In
government
college.
department, politics department. Sorry,
In
as an
college
undergraduate.
then. Ah, wow. Uh-huh.
And I, as a first year undergraduate, there was a compulsory course in history of political thought,
Mhm.
and that was really much. It was too much for me. Also, coming from Hungary, the educational system there is very different, and it's a lot more about rote learning.
Mhm.
And any kind of individual thought is usually just suppressed.
Mhm.
I'm sure it's like traditional educational systems, right? So
Mhm.
it was a huge leap for me to move to the UK under very disordered circumstances anyway, because I was very mentally ill at the time, and moved to a foreign country, different language, very different everything. Luckily, I've met very good friends, including my husband, who are, they're still friends, and
Good.
they're fine with, they're fine with my mental illness as well as everything else. Um, and so then I thought I would do politics. I wanted to do more, and I was really interested in political science. But then when I was doing my master's, I took this course with Christian List, who became my PhD supervisor, and I just became interested in theories of democracy, which is political theory.
Mhm.
And then I taught in politics departments, and didn't really think of myself as a philosopher, a political theorist. And then now, really, I mean, I'm still doing applied philosophy, which is political
Mhm.
philosophy. Applied
Mhm. I can
philosophy,
see
I'm
it.
just doing different applied philosophy.
Mhm. Yeah, 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 yeah. I see that now.
Yeah, sorry, it's kind of,
Political fervor and philosophical mind found the perfect marriage.
yes, so it's a kind of, you know, just kind of a progression of topics from politics
Mhm.
to political theory to
Exactly.
applied philosophy.
Yeah, 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 completely. Look, time flew by, and we are ready for our last big question,
All right.
which is the meaning of life. If life has a meaning, what would you think that would be?
For me, it's love.
Oh, mm-hmm.
But like I say, I love philosophy, but I also have this. I know it's going to sound very soppy, but I just have this feeling of love for the world and especially other people, like people in general rather than particular.
Mhm.
Um, and it's it's something that I don't know. Just it's just for me. It's very important. Love of the world, love of people, love of others,
Mhm.
love of beauty. So
Mhm.
for me, that's what the meaning of my life
Mhm.
is around. I don't know.
That's
It-
beautiful. Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I can completely see. There's some sense of truthfulness that come every time you experience love
Mm,
in a strong way.
yes, and for me, I guess it's just kind of like something that guides my life.
Mhm.
It's not a chosen thing. It's an experiential thing.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
there's no philosophical argument behind it.
yeah, 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 yeah. Thank you so much, Susanna, for this beautiful talk we had. It was really a great pleasure for me to get to know you a little bit better. Thank you.
Correct. Thank you very much.